Ladies and gentlemen, Netflix are cracking down on what is known as VPN pirates. Are you a VPN pirate? VPN piracy is pretty simple. It's if you're using, well, a VPN to access Netflix or another service outside of your region. So for example, if you live in Canada and are accessing the American Netflix, or if you live in America and trying to access the British Netflix, although why you'd want to, I'm unsure, then you are effectively being labelled as a VPN pirate. And Netflix, as well as the movie industry as a whole, want to crack down on this, and they already are starting. In fact, over the past few weeks, Netflix have already started to take action who are using certain tools. The Android application has already started to force a Google DNS, which now makes it a lot harder to use DNS-based location unblockers, and several VPN IP ranges have also already been targeted. TorGuard, who are one of the largest VPN providers for just such a this type of thing, has said, and I quote, "This is a brand new development. A few weeks ago we received the first reports from a handful of clients that Netflix blocks access to VPN or proxy usage. This is the first time I've ever heard of Netflix displaying this type of error message to a VPN user." This was said by, and I'm probably going to butcher the poor person's name, but TorGuard's Ben van der Pelt. Now, that's not just the only incident. In fact, continuing with this, they said, and I quote, "I have a sneaking suspicion that Netflix may be testing new IP blocking methods temporarily in certain markets. At this time, the block does not seem to be aggressive and may be only targeting at IP ranges that exceed too many simultaneous logins." One of the leading forces behind this is actually, well, Sony Pictures. You can see that they're in all of the popular headlines at the moment, and Sony Pictures are preparing various content protection agreements. These are, in a nutshell, saying, well, you can't have this content shown in this location because, well, you know, licensing issues. And as such, and this is a quote, "Netflix must use geolocation bypass detection technology to detect known web proxies, DNS-based proxies, anonymizing services, and VPNs which may have created the primary intent for bypassing geo-restrictions." And furthermore, back last year in summer, Sony Pictures actually conducted research to identify which IP ranges various VPNs and proxies are actually using, and then they shared these with not just Netflix but various other services. For example, and you might be aware of, say, Netflix or Amazon, and they have already started to really block access to certain services. And funnily enough, if you actually access Now TV, which is basically the version of Sky TV online in the United Kingdom, if you access that with a proxy or VPN enabled, then it will actually kick you off and say, nope, you're not allowed to actually log in with that, which is a bit frustrating. There are some who even believe that this is going to be further increased by even using the Windows time, in other words, what time zone your system's set to, web browser information, and so on, like your language, to actually start determining if you are actually legitimately within that time zone. Now, do remember that there will be ways around this. If you want to set up your own private server and so on, then that's certainly something you can do, but let's be totally honest, it's outside the remit of what most people are comfortable of doing, and also a hell of a lot of effort just to watch US Netflix. In other words, they know that they can't stop all of it, because that's pretty much impossible, but what they can do is make it, unfriendly to do so. Now, it's very tempting to look at Netflix and kick them in the nose, but to be totally honest, it's not necessarily down to Netflix. At the end of the day, Netflix are at the mercy of Sony, they are at the mercy of Fox, they are at the mercy of anyone who's providing them content. Why? Because without the content, if those companies say, well, you know what, we're actually not going to be selling you any more content, forget you, then that's pretty much it. And as I've said in a previous video, if you're paying let's just say you live in the United Kingdom, you're spending your £6 Great British pounds a month on a service, or in other words Netflix, you are basically paying, that cash is there to pay and cover the licensing for the content that is distributed on Netflix within the United Kingdom. The problem is, and this is something the MP3, or I'm sorry, music industry, you see how those are so interchangeable now, have gotten wrong. It's just simply that digital distribution is the way forward. People are just not willing to wait. There's still services. I mean, I did an article a while back, a video a while back, that was going through that you need literally dozens, not just a single, not just 2 or 3, not just, a dozen. We're talking literally several dozen services in the United Kingdom to be able to have enough coverage to cover not only all of the recent television shows, but the recent movies and so on and so on. So yes, technically it's legally possible to access this, but let's face it, even if each of those services is costing you £6 Great British pounds a month, and you've got a dozen of those things, that's a lot of money, and most people are not going to spend that. And some services, for example Now TV, particularly if you start including let's say additional packages like all the movies, it can become quite expensive. It's not really a good situation, in my opinion, for the customer. What really needs to happen, and this isn't something that Netflix can really resolve by itself, this is actually something that, well, all of the movie industry needs to just realise, frankly, from pressure from customers, is that this doesn't work. People want content, they want to play it, they want something simple, they want to pay a flat monthly fee, and they just want to consume media as and when they want to. One of the brilliant things about Netflix, and this is, we've actually, a couple of us recently on the RGT team have started to watch like Marco Polo, and I myself am an avid fan of House of Cards, which of course is another Netflix TV series, and when I first started to watch it with, of course, Frank Underwood, I got really addicted. It was like weekend, and I was just chilling, and I was just watching House of Cards, and I was actually learning a little bit about American politics. I was learning a bit more via West Wing as well, which is another really good show if you're interested in that type of thing. And if you're watching, House of Cards, you can watch one episode, or you can watch all of them at once. It's totally up to you, because I put them all up at once. And of course there is no advertising there, which makes it even better. You're just basically paying a flat fee. My concern is this, to be totally honest, people are still going to want this stuff. They're still going to have a market for this stuff, and they will still physically get hold of this stuff. And we all know where I'm going with getting hold of this stuff, so I don't really need to spell it out for you all. But blocking this is just going to make people go and resort to other means. It's that simple. And to be fair to Gabe Newell, back in the day, Gabe said that the reason people pirate for PC isn't necessarily the price, it's the distribution. It's a pain in the ass. Now, ironically enough, Gabe's semi gone back on his word on that, because price has somewhat gone up on PC games. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft, and, really you shouldn't be paying that amount, considering that at the end of the day, the publishers aren't getting having to pay Sony a rather large cut. Arguably, however, of course, they still have to pay Steam for the distribution model, unless, of course, they're doing it through Uplay, but I am somewhat getting off the beaten path. My point being that, quite simply, digital distribution is here to stay. Streaming is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And I think the film companies just kind of need to realise this, and it's not just... While I'm very tempted to place a lot of blame on Sony Pictures and other companies, the problem is it's not just them. HBO, Fox, and so on and so on. Each of them want a slice of the little pie, and the problem is it starts divvying it up and making it extremely difficult for customers. Sky in the United Kingdom have a pretty big stranglehold on quite a lot of the new shows that are coming out. What does that mean? Well, that means for customers, if you don't have Sky Network, and it's kind of a problem even if you're using a different cable package in the United Kingdom, just for those who don't know, there's Virgin, and certain channels on Virgin, there's certain channels that are available on Sky that are not allowed or not shown on Virgin, so you're basically missing out on some of the really top shows. It's just a bit of a problem, and of course it's all competitor stuff, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, obviously there's got to be some exclusivity there, but it does lead to quite a lot of illegal nightmare for this online distribution. And let's face it, DVD sales, Blu-ray sales. Blu-ray's another thing. I was reading just a while back an article, and there are dozens of them, so I'm not going to link one. You can just Google it yourself. It'll take you literally 1 second in Google. But Blu-ray has not taken off in the way that people had hoped to. Sony is somewhat disappointed with it, along with all of their partners. Why hasn't it not taken off? Quite simple. You can guess. Digital distribution, my friends. Blu-ray is really handy for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One because of the increased amount of content, of course, on the disc. But let's face it, really they need to bring down the digital pricing structure there so that, once again, we can consume media how we really want to rather than have to mosey on into a store. And it still, to me, takes the piss that certain titles, particularly in certain regions, are considerably more expensive for gaming than what they are if you were to go into a store, digitally. They're more expensive, and that is frankly ridiculous. And it's even happening sometimes on PC. Amazon retail copies are sometimes cheaper than physically downloading it via store. Not physically, but downloading it via Steam or Uplay. But as I said, getting back on topic, Blu-rays, they've just not taken off as well as what people hope for. The mediums are more expensive, and you're getting this really weird situation where people who are not too comfortable with digital distribution are still quite happily stuck with DVDs. But those of us who are younger, those of us who are tech savvy, those of us who are pushing towards 4K televisions or pushing towards the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One and high-spec PC, or maybe using Chromecast or God knows what other devices to stream. Let's face it, pretty much anything streams now. You can get a mobile phone, or even my old Samsung S2 that I had back in the day, I'm pretty sure had HDMI out to a TV. And, even the Huddle tablet that we got sent for review, that's got HDMI out, and that thing's a budget range thing. And by no means is that even, unusual. My point being that all of these different methods to stream are just becoming synonymous, and let's be honest, Blu-rays are quite expensive, and who the hell wants to wait for a film to be delivered, or for you to go all the way down to the store, for you to pick up the DVD or the Blu-ray or whatever, to come all the way back just to pop it in, particularly if you're renting, and particularly if you don't even know if you're going to bloody like the thing. That's why streaming services now are becoming the thing, because it just takes a few seconds to Google a couple of trailers on YouTube, and I do that all the time. Hey, what movie do I want to watch? And I'll just the other day, just yesterday in fact, I had a quick Google, what's the best horror movies or horror series on Netflix or on Sky, and I just literally Googled it, list came up, went to YouTube, looked at a couple of trailers, that's not my thing, maybe, oh actually this looks kind of cool, oh that definitely looks kind of cool. By the way, I've been told that it's not really horror orientated, but I've also been told that I Saw the Devil's pretty good. I believe it's Korean. It's ultra violent. I've heard it's kind of like Man on Fire, if you've seen that with Denzel Washington. It looks pretty good from the trailers anyway. My friend said it was pretty excellent, but no accounting for taste. So if it sucks, don't blame me. But anyway, that's what we do now. Well, that's what I do anyway, and a lot of my friends do. We just kind of go on trailers, look, okay, that looks kind of cool, and then stream the thing from Netflix or whatever services. What I'm basically saying, I don't place the blame necessarily on Netflix. At the end of the day, they are not the ones who are enforcing these legislations. As I said, it is Sony and these other services. But for us customers, it's not good. Anyway, I've rambled on far too much for this. So, the usual stuff, if you could comment, give me your thoughts. A like would be mighty appreciated, and if you subscribe, I shall love you via the internets forever. Well, maybe not super forever, because I'm not a long time kind of relationship guy at the moment, but we can have a short term fling maybe. Anyway, I'll see you soon, take care, bye for now.